The Uncharted series has now closed off its PS3 trilogy, gaining in the public eye the reputation as this generation's action-adventure series of choice. Personally though, I only really find the second game in the series to be a title I derive much pleasure from. You see, I've experienced all three games, and I must say the third title never really quite clicked with me. As I played, I noticed that I wasn't really enjoying the experience that much compared to the previous entry to the series. So today I'm going to try and dissect what just didn't work about Uncharted 3. Keep in mind though I will be touching upon major plot points in both Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 3, so yes, spoilers will be prevalent as we progress. Something a linear title like Uncharted 3 must completely nail is its pacing. A globe-trotting game that relies on a relentless barrage of continuous plot points to keep its narrative and thus the gameplay moving, has to offer a set of events that, while not necessarily catering to the player, must feel natural if the person playing is to be immersed in any way. In other words, a linear title has to deliver a heavily constructed experience but disguise it in a way that the player doesn't notice it's doing so. The Half-Life and God of War series do a fairly good job at accomplishing this, if both in different ways. Uncharted 3, on the other hand, feels like it was rather sloppily put together in this regard. It's pretty much common knowledge at this point that Naughty Dog made the levels and set pieces in the game first and then tailored the story around these events. To cater to this need to be in 6 or 7 different places for these drastically different action scenes, Uncharted 3 jumps around constantly, which severely breaks game flow. We transition and hey look, we're in a different country, because we had to accommodate that next epic set piece.
We gotta warn them. Yeah, and get to Syria fast.
I'm really not sure if this was the kind of mentality used in the previous 2 games, because if it is, they certainly did a better job at hiding it. Uncharted 2 only drastically jumped locations twice, both times within the first hour or so. When Nathan hits that jeep, from there on we basically get to see everything our protagonist sees until the credits roll. In Uncharted 3, we're constantly appearing in new locations, and it's just jarring. We start off in England, and then we're in the past, and then we're in the jungle, and whoops, castle time. I get the feeling that since Uncharted 2 was praised so heavily for its set pieces, that it basically became the priority for the third installment. I mean, I think those who have played are pretty aware of the boat's graveyard level, where the game drastically changes atmosphere and nothing relevant to the plot transpires for about 2 hours. Or how about when Nathan Drake is pushed to his physical limits with the intense desert level, as he barely manages to survive a gargantuan shootout shortly after narrowly escaping the demise at the hands of the wasteland that preceded. Does the player get some downtime after this exhausting exercise? No, straight back into more shootouts a moment later. Uncharted 2 paced a similar scenario almost perfectly. After Nathan survives the violent train level and bitter fight out in an engulfing blizzard, the player is then given some time to cool off by interacting for a while in a safe environment. The game even takes a while to get back into the straight-up gunfight by easing us back into the final finishing set of action scenes with a fairly laid-back platforming level. Also, Uncharted 3's ending, for all its build-up, feels almost rushed in how quickly it tries to wrap everything up, though I'll be getting into that a little more in a bit. The series has never had the greatest of writing. I would argue that Naughty Dog's previous Jag games had much better credible scripts. Here though, the disjointed pacing really didn't help, and what made it all the worse were the underwhelming bad guys who showed up in this entry. Now, there's already a great video out there on why Talbot was an utter mess of a character, so I won't dwell on him too much. But I must say the main villain Marlowe really didn't hold much of a candle to 2's Lazarevich. Uncharted 3 can never decide if they wanted Marlowe to be a straight-up villain who sought power overall, or a more indirect threat that tried to outsmart our heroes instead of straight up murdering them, so as a result she failed to be threatening. Now with Lazarevich, you know, the dude means business and won't pull any punches. His one-on-one conversations with Drake may be fairly one-dimensional, but they at least established him as a tangible threat. Marlowe is an example of the writers wanting to make a more complex villain, but really half-arsing it as a result, making the simpler, more credible character a more viable option here. The final boss was a real disappointment. Since Marlowe is obviously not physically capable of taking on Drake, that job is left to Talbot, the man who can't decide if he's stronger or weaker than Drake. What ensues is a laughable attempt at a climax punctuated by a cluster of quick-time events that really don't make you feel like you're overcoming the villains yourself as much as you've been shown it and occasionally asked to hit a button to make it happen. The final fight against Lazarevich, on the other hand, is actually very well done and is implemented well in conjunction with the established themes of the story. Instead of it being just some random gunfight against an enemy with a really long health bar, you are forced to run away from the tyrannical warlord, slowly chipping away at his health as you flee, barely surviving in an enclosed area. You're in a submissive position as the weaker character Drake, while Lazarevich is still the walking powerhouse he's been built up as. It's satisfying to see him slowly get frustrated as you clamber to evade him. In Uncharted 3, Talbot just gets really mad and then everyone has a punch-up. Fun fact, Talbot here is voiced by Robin Atkin Downes, who played Travis Touchdown in No More Heroes, while Sully is voiced by Richard McGonigal, who played Dr. Peace, also in No More Heroes. I guess you could call this a rematch. Finally, let me dig into something that really bemused me about Uncharted 3, just how much it ripped off and in some places completely copied Uncharted 2. I'm rather befuddled by just how many scenarios and plot points were reused. After the intro mission, which is split up with flashbacks to previous events, Nathan and Sully head to a jungle location where they discover some clues loosely tied to the plot, after which they are held up at gunpoint by the villains and barely escape. The gang enter a secret area in the middle of a city to discover a clue, at which point, upon backtracking out, they are ambushed by the villains' henchmen. Elena and Nathan infiltrate a cargo area, after which he drives Drake onto a moving vehicle. Nathan narrowly survives a confrontation on the fast-moving vehicle before it crashes and is forced to fend for his life in an extremely hazardous environment with no hope of salvation. He's saved, however, by a native of the area before partaking in a chase sequence involving jumping between various trucks, after which the player reaches an abandoned temple which within a hidden city is revealed where some dodgy ancient MacGuffin centuries ago caused the demise of his population. Nathan fights his way through against a group of abnormal superpowered enemies to the center of the city where the villain's plan is thwarted as the ancient remains crumble, with our heroes enacting a dashing escape. Now don't get me wrong, Uncharted 3 isn't a terrible game. Is it a 10 out of 10 Game of the Year nominee? No. It's a messy action title that caught me off guard with its lack of creativity and somewhat patched together series of events. Subpar for Naughty Dog, I gotta say yes. That said, as usual, I still look forward to their future projects.